And I also wanted to mention some of the challenges they might have. Do you want to move on to that later?
Yeah, go right ahead, challenges.
So I'll just quickly go over a few challenges because my assumption is that you are sitting here because you're interested in hiring new talents and talents coming from immigrant and refugee populations, right? So those who came to the United States as refugees or immigrants, the first barrier or first challenges, as you can imagine, is language. So language barrier is there. And the more problematic with that is that because they're working, all the workers are working, they don't have time to invest on their language skills. So they cannot really attend the ESL instruction programs. So one program I am involved as a program evaluator is a workforce development program that is run by Erie County. What they found is the number one barrier for job promotion for them is that language. So what they decided is using the program funding, they created an on-site ESL program. I think it is brilliant. This is a great idea. I'm hoping that, to make this program better, I wish they created some kind of mechanism that the employers can support these workers, ESL workers, to attend the ESL program as professional development or job training so that they get paid for their time. That's my ideal one. The second thing that list of the challenges they face is racial discrimination, racism, in combination with their language skills. So I would call it languageism. So they get discriminated because of their low English skills. So one worker was asked to work on 2 machines. He was working on 2 machines so busy, and quickly he noticed that just next to him, there were 2 workers working on 1 machine. How bad is that? So he got so frustrated, and I was talking with a life coach who was working with him. My immediate question is that, did he get paid more than the other workers? No. So he tried to make a case that I cannot do this any longer. This is too much work for me. But he couldn't do it because in this unequal treatment situation, number one, his English is not good enough to make argument about it. And the second, some employers prefer certain group of refugees to others because culturally, some group of people, assertiveness is not really encouraged in their culture. This one, on the surface, probably there's no problem. Nothing is bubbling up, but I don't think it can be sustainable. So last thing I want to just quickly mention is their mental health. They need a lot of support. In one of our studies, what we found is that Burmese refugees, about 50% of them had trauma symptoms that warranted further examination, and 20% of them had depression. So they look okay on the surface, but they need a lot of the support to continue their job and have the life they deserve in this country. One thing that I wanted to mention was that, we're talking about their legal status and what they go through. Everybody's experience is different. We cannot group them in one way or the other. So what I would ask to many people is to ask them. And the best way to work with the immigrants and refugees are to immerse in their culture. If they bring in food that you're not familiar with, be curious and talk with them. I think that they would be very welcome to explain and share what they have. They would be proud of doing that. And without our reaching out, the people who arrived here first or generations before, if we don't reach out to the newcomers, to them, and there is no, it's not easy, I have to say that, it's not easy to learn about the challenges and triumphs they may have so that we can really work together.
Does anyone else have any thoughts on the challenges?
You speak about a lot of things that I love to hear and that we live every day in the factory, so thank you. And it's critical. She had mentioned that trauma is a big issue. You have to deal with that. We see PTSD among the Burmese and Sudanese quite often. And to put it into perspective, if you're working in an employment agency or a workplace that has uniforms, even be careful with uniforms. We've had individuals come through the factory on tours, and these were young military cadets. It actually frightened a few of our refugees because they had grown up in communities where the military and their nation would patrol and kill. So the one fellow ran into the restroom to wash his face underwater, to douse water on his face, to calm himself down. So that exists every day. And I look at the individual that from Sudan, he just spent 2.5 months over there because he had to move his mother out of Khartoum. So you heard everything about the civil war that was taking place over there. He wanted to make sure that she didn't get killed. But the frustrating thing is that he could never bring her to the United States as a future citizen without going through a rigorous process. So he had to move her throughout Sudan to get her away from the danger. So that exists day to day. And what I look at it is, employment's an E word. The other E words related to that are, as you speak, education, empathy, and engagement. And those are absolutely critical. When it comes to educate yourself first. As she mentioned, realize what's happening over there. Realize what's happening in their lives individually. It's tough to say to look at what people might consider to be national news here. I don't want you to really go to CNN and Fox and all that to get your news. Read his studies on what happened in Burma. That was a great series of stories that you did. It was probably 8 years ago.
Almost seven.
Yeah. So make sure you go back in time on Google, check that out. And even there's a blessing that we have here being at the border. Pay attention to the Canadian news. The way that they preface global news is the way that we have to look at it to understand the people there. So once you educate yourself, make sure you educate your coworkers because they have to understand. So what we did when the Burmese first came to us, it started off as one. As you mentioned, with word of mouth, all of a sudden 2 weeks later, there's 15 people from Myanmar lined up at our door that want to fill out applications. So that's how it started, that's how it went. What we did for the coworkers that existed in the workplace at that time, the employee newsletter of that week, I did 2 pages of everything that they lived through in Myanmar and what to expect, how to treat them. So that way they became educated on those issues. But you also have to educate the partners outside of your building as well, because you have people that provide services to you, whether it's your HMO, your insurance carrier, and even health services. And to put that into perspective for you, there was a health service organization around here in Western Europe to which we would send our coworkers for their pre-employment physical. Individuals in that office that we later found out would roll their eyes when someone would come in and they would say, Burmese Bob Confer is at it again, because they didn't want to deal with the language issues and the other impasses related to that. So it took it upon myself to educate them on that. So once you go from the education standpoint, then you get to the empathy, which is related to that. You have to understand these issues. That fellow from Sudan, we gave him that 2.5 months off so he could go take care of his mother. A lot of workplaces would probably perceive him to be disposable and not allow him to come back, to just say leave and don't come back, things like that. And then you have to look at different issues. One thing that we did is just a tiny little nuance related to the trauma and the other issues of culture. We opened up a prayer and peace room in our factory just 2 years ago, and that's so individuals, whether they're Karens who might be practicing the Catholic faith, or it may be Muslims or maybe Hindu, they have a place to go. And it's also the peace room, because when you hear about all these issues that are still happening back home in Myanmar, that gives them a place that when they see it on the national news that may be playing on the TV in the factory, they can go up there and rest during a break, collect their thoughts, and take care of that. So that ultimately leads to engagement and just getting them engaged.
Sounds like you're the type of company that I would want to come work for, candidly. That was so beautifully described. I was curious to understand how your company, not only the people that you brought in and went through the 4 E's, and it sounds like you went through a progression yourself. It sounds like it's almost changed you as a person. But how is the company benefited? If you could list maybe 3 things that as a result of your passion, integrity for these 4 E's, how has it demonstrated results more from a business perspective for you guys?
So related to that, I always tell people all the time, there's always the altruism and the good stuff, but when you want to sell someone on it, I always have to look at it from a capitalist big standpoint. So when I do that, I look at the return on investment. When you look at how much we put into someone to get them trained to be that machine operator, to be that maintenance person, it's going to take weeks, months, even years at a time. When you have someone that's dedicated to being there every single day and ultimately dedicated to you, the rewards are going to be substantial. And I look at one Burmese individual who left us to go to Fort Wayne, Indiana, because that's where another significant Burmese population is. He left us a note and gave it to us because he couldn't speak too well in English, but he gave us a note that said, God put us together. So that's the sort of thing that makes me feel good, because we gave him the chance, and as I mentioned, coming from that hell on earth and now coming to heaven, we can see the organization develop, but we can also see the community develop through individuals. So by allowing people to progress in learning English as their second language and ultimately make that their primary language, that's pretty special. And to see them find financial reward, one thing that was a struggle, and that's why I find your office to be an absolute blessing, is prior to that office being created, there was an impasse where leaders in this county did not know that the Burmese individuals were here. So when crime really hit them, they said, we didn't know they were here, we didn't know that crime is an issue. This came from leaders at the county level and also at the city level. And that's kind of frustrating, because at that time, there were 6,000 to 9,000 Burmese people living in Erie County, but they weren't known to exist. So were they hidden? No, they weren't. So they need a voice, they need representation. So by doing what we do at the factory to empower people, they can get engaged with their elected officials. They can do things that are completely American. We had 6 individuals from Myanmar head to Washington, D.C., where there was a rally to talk about the atrocities that were going on in Myanmar. Had they done that back home, they're getting gassed, shot at, and put in jail. So there's a lot of rewards that are the capital rewards, but there's also the altruistic rewards, and seeing good things happen within our organization, within their homes, and also out there in the community. Because it's empowerment. So ultimately it's taking them from being new Americans, scratching off that new, and realizing that they are Americans.
So Bob, it sounds like you started with one and then it grew from there. I presume it's had some impact, because it's difficult to find employees really in any sector at this point. I think we have 38,000 jobs open just in Western New York in manufacturing alone, which is a huge impact on our economy here locally, but that's every community across the U.S. So I'm just, but you started with one and then went on a journey, right? Many people who have not been used to hiring new Americans or refugees or a new population, that they don't understand. I can't even pronounce your name. I'll call you Kim.
Wooksoo.
Yeah, I apologize. But most people have to see the long-term benefits of this to make the investment, right? In getting the first one on board. And that's why you feel like in educating the rest of the business population here, it's important to understand the implications on your business, because most of us are coin operated in some way. No money, no mission in some regards. And it seems like you have a very pragmatic experience that has helped. You see what I'm saying? People are still going to look at it from a business perspective. We can be altruistic, but there's still a business implication, etc. So can you comment on that? Has it helped ultimately the business?
Yes, in terms of quality of work, it's significant, because it's a generation of workers that were doing blue-collar work. And then when you look at the need for, especially in the STEM category that you mentioned, that a lot of individuals working in STEM now are actually the new Americans. And that comes from survivability leading to ingenuity. So the skill sets they picked up overseas, we had one fellow from Bosnia who was in our maintenance department. He picked up his skills for hydraulics, electrical, maintenance by being in the military over there. There were other individuals, such as a fellow from Vietnam, who actually goes home at night to use his mill and lathe to make the work knives that our work crew uses to cut plastic. He learned that skill set from being an active participant in the Vietnam War back when he was at home. And then there's another individual that I know of from Myanmar who actually became a machinist in another organization because the government there trained him how to build bombs. And that's a skill set that's kind of not a skill set, but he transferred it into being a machinist. And then also related to that survivability, as we look at maybe some environmental issues that might present themselves, and you take someone that grew up farming in an area that may have been dry, there may have been a shortage of water. When we look at those issues now impacting the Western United States, it's that intellect, that mindset that we can take from those new Americans, apply that to the farming sector as well to survive and thrive working with less.
So to go back to what Darren and Jennifer were articulating earlier, so we have a government representative, we've got International Institute. Obviously, you said this is how it would change immigration. What is the job permit the biggest barrier to creating the first employee at one of our businesses here in the community? And if so, are we solely dependent on what's happening at the federal level? Or is there something we can do as a community that we have control over, more control over, that would initiate that job application, the job permit? If that is the number one barrier, at least that's what it sounded like, Jennifer, when you were describing it. When we have a government representative here, is that a barrier to get the process started with more companies like Bob's?
Can I answer it and then I'll jump in? So I'll answer your question with a yes and a no. Yes, the job permit is a barrier for the group of individuals who are seeking asylum because it's going to take them 6 months to 1 year to get work. So I'm referencing probably 600 individuals in our community who are at the hotels or the Vive shelter who are not yet eligible to work. So yes, that's a barrier. However, no, I do not think that there's a problem for employers here. I think there's ample labor supply coming in because refugee resettlement is bringing people in all the time now, and there's an upward trend. There is a political element to this, and that we'll see what happens with the next presidential election, but Biden has put in to continue to increase that number, and as the system gets sourced, more people are coming in. My agency was asked to give 3-year numbers of projections of how many we could help, and so we increased our numbers of who we would help. So each of the 4 agencies in town that do refugee resettlement have increased their numbers. I'm expecting that there will be about 2,500 refugees in the next year, and then from there maybe 2,500 to 3,000 the year after, while we wait on a political election cycle. That's people coming in.
To work?
They would come in eligible to work. Some of those are going to be kids. Some of them might have a medical condition, but that's at least 2,000 to 3,000 people coming in this year, 2024 coming up, and 2025, before possibly a presidential change. In the meantime, there's also other people who will come who will also be eligible to work, and those are what are referred to as secondary migrants. So an example is the Bengali population that Darren talked about, or other refugees. So we've talked about today populations coming from Burma, Sudan, Somalia, also Iraqis, Afghans, Colombians, there's a list of 8, I'm forgetting a few more, Eritreans. So they're all coming too. Buffalo resettles all of those populations. We're not limited to 1 or 2 populations, like for instance, Minnesota only takes in Somalis. We actually here have been open to all. So as a family is settled here, they may have a US tie that was settled somewhere else, and like Indiana or Texas, which isn't super friendly and doesn't provide a lot of support. So the minute their case management stuff runs out, they come here for secondary migration. So I think we have a pipeline, to give you a quick number answer, I think we have a pipeline of 3,000 people coming in within the next year. I think that's going to be buttressed by hundreds of others who will come here for secondary migration if we continue to be a welcoming community. And then in the meantime, the folks who are asylum seeking, I believe most of them have been put through a process where they're supposed to be applying and or have that EAD in process, so they may be eligible to work within the next year too. So I think we're going to have a bigger labor supply in the next year while we see what happens with the White House.
And I want to just give Bob so much credit. That should be glossed over what he's done. That is literally a textbook case study in diversity, equity, and inclusion, because you literally took the time to educate yourself first, and which is the most important piece. You own the company. So for diversity, equity, and inclusion, inclusion to be effective, typically the leadership has to have the buy-in and believe. So also what you did too is in the sense of you made them feel included. So, there's your inclusion piece, and then you're also giving them the tools that they need to basically be able to get the job done like all the other employees that you have. And that's just something, again, more companies need to take the time to do. What you saw was, wait a minute, have an individual here who works hard. If I just put a little bit of time and cultural competency into this, and you're like, wait a minute. So to answer his question with the bottom line, what companies, I think they're starting to figure it out. A diverse company is usually a more profitable company because you're getting different things from different angles. So what you did, you found a group of employees that are hard workers, get the job done, and you said your quality control went up as well. So across the board on that, and now it's helping your company thrive, right? As opposed to a company who is just less diverse, who won't take the chance and pour in some of that sweat equity. And then something to go back, I don't want to miss this one point. Manufacturing jobs, you said there was 35,000 in the area, right? Now, isn't that weird? Because think about Buffalo, those who are born and raised in Buffalo, remember people about 15, 20 years ago were always like, well, where are the manufacturing jobs at? I just want to go to high school, graduate, and then work in the plant. And, we were saying, okay, things are cyclical. They changed, right? They started going into more technology-based jobs and where you had to have some type of degree or certificate or what have you, but now the manufacturing jobs are back, but people have kind of moved on. If you want to say native-born Americans, whatever, have kind of moved on and started looking elsewhere, but now here are the manufacturing jobs again, but we don't supposedly have people to fill them, but no, they're out there. We just aren't looking in the right places, and to help, or putting in the cultural competency to help make people feel welcome. So nice job again. I have to compliment you on that.
Okay, we are just about out of time. So I want to...
I have one really quick question.
One quick question.
I'm so sorry. I work in workforce development, recruitment, development, and retention exclusively in manufacturing and logistics. I've been doing it for 15 years. So my question is turnover. Do you see a reduction? Do you see increased tenure? Because I am a huge fan of this. I want to make that statement up front, right? Do you see a reduction in turnover with immigrant and refugee populations as opposed to native populations?
Yeah, the turnover rate is incredibly low. They're going to stay, especially when you invest in them, they're going to invest in you.
Right, loyalty. Right, and I think, there was a statement back here, and this is a piece of data that I use all the time, but generally turnover in manufacturing and logistics, we will look at somewhere between, it costs about 100 to 150% of their annual salary to replace them per person. At $15 an hour, state minimum wage, right, that's $30,000 a year, just over. So you're looking at about $65,000 per entry-level warehouse worker, right, in replacement when you look at training, lost productivity, all of those things. So when you can reduce your turnover rate, right, it's an instant boost to the bottom line.
And I just add on turnover, and it goes to this whole education and empathy thing that we've been talking about. So I feel like I should mention that while we are a nonprofit, the Institute runs a interpreting and translation program, so you can hire us, which gives us money toward our bottom line, but we can translate your documents and training materials. We can bring in an interpreter for, training sessions. We also run cultural competency programming, so we can come in and talk to your workforce about things like prayer rooms and understanding what people have gone through. And there's services like that in this town. Like, we're great, please support us. There's other resettlement partners in town that do that as well. Joblio is hosting this forum, also is in this space. But there's people here that in our community want to be welcoming, and that we don't have turnover at a job or departures from our city, right? We want this growth. We want people here to make Buffalo great. And so all of those pieces come into making sure that someone who doesn't speak English today, who's gone through trauma, can get settled, have a nice house, have their kids in school, have a job that's meaningful to them, start saving some money so they can buy their house, and become productive members of our community. And so every piece of the people who are here today, we're all stakeholders in that, which is making Buffalo great.
And last piece on that.
Last word.
Yeah, last piece. If you can help figure out solutions to transportation and English proficiency. So that's what will help also retention, because oftentimes there's many people who want to work the jobs and do well, but they just cannot get there or afford to get there. So I know Buffalo Niagara Partnership is working on some solutions with that, but those seem to be the two biggest things. So, thank you for having us.
Round of applause for our panelists.